Today we're going to go through all the scoia'tael cards and rank them in order of how awesome they are and how strong they are. This is not, I repeat, this is not me saying these cards need to be buffed or nerfed. This is just me telling you how good I think each card is. Okay? So some cards might be really strong. That doesn't mean they should necessarily get nerfed, because like whether you buff or nerf the card is not about how strong a card is. It's about how much better or worse the game will be with that change. Like that should be the only criteria for a change is, will the game after this change be better or worse? That's it. Sorry, need to move the chat a little bit. Don't want you guys to miss out on that. And this should do it. Lock everything down so we don't move it by accident. Beautiful. Okay. Finally, just gotta fix the music. Something a little less distracting. Okay. So like we did with the other ones, we're gonna go through all the golds and we're gonna put them in each category. These are the categories I've prepared right now. Suspiciously strong, auto-include, basically balanced, could be buffed, depressingly bad, and Malayan. There's also a special category in the which I thought deserved calling out for scoia'tael, which is type X in deck builder. So for example, when it comes to scoia'tael cards, or well, scoia'tael decks, Symbiosis plays this card called Spring Equinox, which has boost an allied unit by 0. Increase the boost by 1 for each nature card other than Spring Equinox. So there's a lot of cards that you end up playing, not because you're like, I want that card, but because it has the tag. So these neutral cards, specifically Tempest and either Fog or Biting Frost and Spring Equinox, get played in Symbiosis, which used to be a Devotion deck, but now is just a type X in deck builder deck, which is my least favorite kind of deck, because I think the most fun part about a card game is decks. Like making a deck or changing a deck or putting together a deck, coming up with a new deck. Like that's the fun part. I mean, I also like building games, right? So that could be like, I might be biased, but if I wanted to play something that somebody else put together and never like contribute to it, then like what's the point of even having a deck builder, right? And some scoia'tael decks recently especially have become, and this isn't just ST, but like they have become very hard. It's become very hard for anyone to build them differently. Like a lot of decks want Simless and 2 backup plans and 2 waylays, and so you want Vanadane, and then you want Alyssa for the Vanadane, or you want Teleann, or like, you know, like it just like a lot of the deck just makes itself, especially a Deadeye Ambush deck. So to give you an example, you want to make an Elves deck, right? Well, Angus is a really good card, but but on it says if your starting deck has at least 4 unique traps, this card starts in your hand. So now I gotta type trap. I need 4 unique traps. Okay, well, everyone agrees these 2 traps are shit, so I'm not playing those. I guess I'm playing Serpent, Deception, Pitfall. This is also shit. So there, like these are my traps, right? These are the 5 playable traps. And whether you play Incinerating Trap or not, that's up to you. But this says you need to have at least 4 unique traps, right? So now that's already built because I wanted to play this new card, Angus. Well, what's next? Reordain. If played adjacent to at least 1 trap, play an elf from your deck. If it's adjacent to at least 1 elf, play a trap from your deck. So you want to have an elf and a trap on your board at all times. And he's 13 provisions, right? And so you're going to do that. And then like, obviously you want Verno, right? Because he does 2 damage for every Deadeye. Like you're playing all this Deadeye card, so you have to play Verno. You're going to play Waylays because that gives you Deadeye. Like once you put Angus in the deck, you're going to take everything that synergizes with Deadeyes, and you're going to play all those cards. So you're going to play these, right? You're going to play these. You're going to play these. You might even play this. It's 5 provisions. You're going to play this because it spawns dead eyes, right? And because all of these cards are high provision, you're going to play a low provision deck, the low provision elves. Okay, so you got the dead eyes, you got the waylay, you got the Symbiosis. And then there's this other new card called Heist, which is a special, and I believe it's 12 provisions now because it got nerfed in the council. There it is. You can't really play Yorvet's Gambit because it requires that you have 6 or more traps in your deck, in your starting deck, so that you can pick which traps come out. Like, if you go this is 12 provisions, you're basically... This is another, like, you have to put 6 traps. Like, you saw there's not that many traps, so we got to put, like, 2 more traps in the deck. And you got to put Eldain in the deck, because why not? At this point, you have your Red Scam. Like, you have all these traps, you might as well play Eldain. And then you have, like, no provisions left. We're already only 16 cards in. We have 45 provisions left. That is an average of 5 provisions per card, right? If we want, like, you might look at this and be like, well, we can do damage by 3 or do a bunch of random pings or damage a row or whatever. But what if we just want to kill one critical thing? How do we do that? Well, the cheapest way to do that is Yavin, right? And he's also an elf and has synergy with Heist, so you do that. And now you have, we need 8 more cards. And even, like, it's less than 5, because 8 times 5 would be 40 provisions, right? So you have less than 5 provisions left per card. Like, that's it. Like, all the freedom in deck making is gone. You might want to run a tutor. Okay, now you have 7 for 25. That means you get 6 4 provision cards and 1 5 provision card, and that's it. Like, you're done. So, you're gonna have to pick elves, because you need elves to be on the board and traps so that your Reordain isn't a brick. So you're gonna play, like, you're gonna type the word elf. And these are your options. Congratulations. You're playing 2 tricksters because they're, like, the best ones. Maybe a bowman or 2. You're going to want purifies because of Heist. Another bowman. Okay, maybe you're, like, really, like, try hard and you also play a squirrel or, you know, or a peller. Like, the deck built itself. I can't even fit a squirrel. Okay, here. 5, scoia'tael, elf. It's archer. Congratulations. Or this could be an incinerating trap, if you want to be safer. Chat's pointing out that I actually forgot the best elf of all. Since we have 5 cards that are higher than 11 provisions, that's called deck building skill. We now have to go in here and pick this beautiful, totally not unbalanced card called Oxenford Scholar. Each of these in this deck will play for 9 points, right? You just drop one, it plays for 9. So you can cut, like, 2 of anything, like one of these and, I don't know, one of these and play Scholars if you want. Scholars are offensive to me, so, like, if it's my deck, I'm not playing them. But anyway, all this is to go is that, like, this deck built itself. My deck is going to look the same as your deck, even if you've never seen my deck. Just literally by picking, like, these cards, the rest of the deck is dictated to you. Maybe you're not running Yavin and Call of the Forest. Maybe you're running some different, right? Some people don't run Heist. Okay, like, but in general, like, that's the deck. Like, if you pick the archetype of Deadeye Ambush, 95% of the deck is already decided for you. And so that is why I have a tier, Type X in Deck Builder, and I despise anything that contributes to that style of deck building, because now, like, in order to play, like you have to play traps to play this card, because this is your consistency card. This is the consistency card that they got, and it's a good card, and you'd be a fool not to play it, and so that's what you're doing. And so any cards that, like, make this problem worse are going to go in that section for me. So with that being said, let's get through the cards. This should work. So we got Dana, right? Dana is a card that if you play it in round 1, gives you carryover. Like it boosts all your cards by 1, basically, because it's a relic, and usually you don't have any other relics in hand. And it's used to boost Shiru. It's played in every Harmony deck. That's in first form. Second form is also busted because it boosts 1 unit of each category, which should have lots of if you're playing Harmony, by 2. And so with this scenario on the board, everything that you play gets boosted by like 3, 4, or 5. Usually, and just makes it so Harmony, which is like an engine deck, becomes a point slam deck that also boosts. And I've had like 4 or 5 card rounds with the Harmony deck that played for 100+ points. Like that's insane. And this is definitely an answer or lose card, but also on deploy it has a lot of value in second form. In first form, it is almost always an answer or lose card. Sometimes you're forced to play 3 cards and pass, but by then they've gotten like 20, 30 points of carryover. It's like a muta generator with legs. All right, so this is why it's insuspiciously strong. Saskia. This used to be like suspiciously strong. It got nerfed to 14 provisions and 3 power subsequently by CDPR. Then the council, in their wisdom, made it 4 power, which I think was kind of a nerf because like it made it more vulnerable to COC and Riptide and things that just target the tallest unit. But at this point, I don't think it's suspiciously strong. It has quite a deck building cost. And because it summons bronzers, it means you can't play bronzers that like have a good deploy that you want. I'm still not a huge fan of this card. It's probably at this point just balanced. I don't know. It's 14 provisions and you have to make your whole deck. Like, it's just whatever. Aquan. This is another bullshit card. Because it turns all your naiads into nature, as in, so let's do that. Let's do the same thing we did with Heist, but with Symbiosis, okay? Keep an Vitality charges 3, which isn't the most important part of this lead. The most important part is the Symbiosis part. Which gives you passive 1 Symbiosis. So how do you make this deck, right? Well, you start with Aquan. Where's she at? Aquan. There she is. So it says, deploy. Infuse all your naiads with the nature category, wherever they are. Whenever you spawn a wandering triad, give it vitality equal to the number of drives you control. What's a wandering triad? It says Symbiosis. Whenever you play a nature card, spawn a wandering triad on a random allied row and set its power to equal to the number of Symbiosis you control. It's just a token. Think of it like a drone in Arrakis. But instead of a drone, it's a tree, and then it gets boosted, or the power is set to the number of Symbiosis you have. Symbiosis is just a passive tag. Think of it like Thrive. And the more Symbiosis you have, the bigger those trees are going to be. Passively, baseline, you have 1 Symbiosis if you pick this leader. So the second you play any nature card, you get a tree spawn with 1 power. What Aquan does is every time you spawn a tree, it boosts it. So it like, by the number of dryads you control. And she's a dryad, so right off the bat, right, she's going to boost everything by 1. Sorry, gives it vitality by 1. But the more dryads you have, the more this spits out points. And it has a deploy, so you want to play it even if you think it's going to get removed. So what does the deploy do? It infuses all your naiads with the nature category. What are naiads? Well, they got added recently, and you basically want to put all of them in your deck, which is, there's 2 of them. Like, that's it, right? So by playing this, you've played this. Sorry, by adding 1 to the deck, you've added the other. And then the way that Symbiosis procs is off of nature cards. So you want to put everything that's almost everything that like is a nature card in there. So this plays a bronze nature card from the graveyard, so you put it in. This plays a non-neutral card. This is just a Royal Decree, but with the nature tag and +1. Like, it's just a better Royal Decree. The only downside is it can't play like non-neutrals, but you don't care because why would you? You're playing, all your units are pretty much always scoia'tael units. And then there's Falv, which plays a nature card from your deck. 8 provision tutor, 2 powers. Very balanced on its own, but in Symbiosis, it plays for 1,000,000 points. So you play this. Some people even play Frog Mating Season, but let's come back to that one. You play Rebukes because it's a removal card that's good. You don't play Circle of Life because it's a removal card that's bad. Only does 3. Usually you play at least 1 of these, sometimes 2. And then you play the most ridiculous of all, which is Tempest. which is a nature card, which plays 2 other nature cards. So you can do Call of the Forest into Fog, into Tempest, into 2 like Biting Frost or Impenetrable Fog. And you've played 5 nature cards in 1 turn. So if you're keeping track, that means Aquin would boost 5 different Treants. So you spawn 5 Treants, each of those with the amount of Symbiosis you have. And Aquin will give Vitality to each Treant by the number of Dryads you have. So you could have like 15 points on top of the value of the 5 cards that you played. Just 15 from Aquin, right? Like that's why like you're playing in Symbiosis and they get blue coin and they play Aquin and then they play Tempest and then suddenly you're like 40 points behind and you'll never catch up. You have to pass and they'll bleed you and they'll win a short round. It's just stupid. Like it's stupid that this got changed to a nature card. Tempest used to be a cool and interesting card. It would damage 3 adjacent units by 2 and purify them. And you could use it on friendlies also, which was another cool thing. Sometimes it's worth hitting your own stuff just to purify them, right? You would use this to purify like a Saskia or purify Erlin, stuff that you couldn't target directly, right? It was a cool card. It was also played in like Pirates because it does 3 times 2 damage, which is good for getting armor carryover. Anyway, they reworked it to playing weather cards. And the weather cards a while back got updated to be like 3 turns times 2. So it's really 6 points of damage on each card. So Tempest right now plays for 12 points just by itself and 2 thinning. That's before you consider that it's a nature tag. So in a Symbiosis deck, it plays for infinity points, basically. So you are playing all these cards. So I've already put 15 of my 25 cards are automatically decided. There is no debate, not as like, maybe you don't play Second Dryad's Crest, right? But in like, already, more than 2/3 of my deck has been made for me by our Lord and Savior Malegion and the CDPR design team. Like, that's it. Like, what, did you think you were going to play this game? No, we're going to play the game. You just the one clicking the mouse is how it makes me feel whenever I look at decks like this. Have I forgotten any nature cards? Oh, right. Of course. I mean, if you want to play specials, you got to play Simless. And because nature tag is, you know, smart deck building and should be rewarded or whatever, you're also going to play Spring Equinox, which is right here. Doomed. Why is it doomed? Because it was getting abused with Alyssa and Simless. Boost an allied unit by 0. Increase the boost by 1 for each nature card other than Spring Equinox. So of course you're gonna, if you're gonna play a bunch of nature cards, of course you're gonna play Equinox too, right? And you know that you're gonna only have 13 units. So what are your other units gonna be? Well, there's this guy because it lets you replay a special. So that's just another nature card, basically, right? You're gonna play at least 1 Hamadryad because it has Symbiosis and you give it Vitality. Like, this is a no-brainer. It becomes a 2-point a turn engine if it has Vitality. And you have lots of things that give Vitality, including these fledglings, which are pretty strong. All right, what else have I forgotten, chat? Usually you play one Bountiful Harvest because you want to boost one of your cards to be out of removal range. You can replay this with Forest Protector if you want, or you can replay any of your other nature cards, like a Rebuke. But usually this, because this is the more expensive one, yeah. Oh yeah, there's another nature card that's a tutor, Isengrim's Council. This will give you a Dwarf, Dryad, or Elf from your deck. Well, this is the Elf, the only Elf, and you always want this. But if you have it, you can just play a Dryad, any other Dryad, and you have lots of Dryads in this deck. I oftentimes see people play Saskia Dragon. Why? Because if you spawn a young Dryad with it, it lets you play a Dryad's Caress, which is a nature card. So this is a nature card. Sorry, this plays a nature card. This duplicates a nature card. It benefits from getting Vitality, which is what most nature cards do. And then because you're playing so many specials, you're going to play Gord. And Gord is a dwarf, so Isengrim can tutor him, right? Now you need 4 more cards. One of them has to be a unit. Anybody know what the last unit should be? Do you play Oak Critters? No. No. Probably an Elven Scribe. Hamadryad's a 5P card. Oh, second Hama? There aren't any for some people play an Enchantress, but I think I wouldn't play a second Hamadryad because that card goes tall, but oh wait, yeah, caught a Dryad's Caress. Okay, they play no, you don't play a Purify because you have Dryad's Caress. So we need 2 cards for 13 provisions. Is there a 9 that we forgot? Right, usually you play either Heatwave or like Eskel. So that means we need to cut a 5. Which of these 5s are we cutting? To fit Saskia? You cut Seer? Is that how it works? You cut a Tutor? You cut Isengrim? You just don't need it. I think they either play Saskia or Mahakam Pass, not both, right? Yeah, this like dwarf location is actually something that's played by Symbiosis decks. The one who can find nature. I already have Falve. I don't think I ever see Enchantress, to be honest. Let's say second Hamadryad. Thought it was 7 provisions. Oh, wait. No, I have the right leader. What am I missing, chat? I guess we just cut the Hamadryad. And play like a Elven Scribe. And wait, no. 25 cards, but we need 2 units instead of 2 specials. Wow, none of you actually play Symbiosis, huh? Maybe that's why they play Eskel, so they don't have to run Heatwave. But I think that's trolling. I think I would rather play like... I would rather play Heatwave and just have my Equinoxes be slightly smaller. Because Heatwave's not a nature card, that's why they don't want to play it. You play Igni, no Mahakam Pass. Yeah, Igni, Geralt, Eskel, whatever. It's all the same, right? But what's the rest of it? Like, there's a 10 provision card there, right? You tell me. And then, what's the rest of it? Just random 4Ps? Oh, you run 1 Rebuke. Really? Are people cutting a Rebuke? Thank you, Sam. Yeah, Isengrim, Call of Force, and Fall. To rebuke one hammer draw. Yeah, this is what I was looking for. What's the difference between this and mine? You're running Eskel and Heatwave. Tempest, Harvest, 2 Equinox, 2 Rebuke, 1 Hammer Dryad, 1 of these, 2 of those, 2 Pond Keepers, and then just... You're just not running... Okay, Sasuke instead of Eskel, whatever. So then you're fitting in Isengrim, another 4. Which can be whatever. We're just picking Enchantress here. It could be Pelor, it could be Squirrel. So this right here is Symbiosis. The only negotiable parts of this are like these 2 cards. You can replace one with Mahakam Pass and one with like another removal card. Or if you want to like cut a Rebuke, you can fit in Saskia. Something. But like 95% of this deck is automatically created for you. And that's what I don't like about it. Was the whole point of that tangent. So let's go back to this. So Simless has been, always will be a problematically strong card because it violates the rule of Gwent, which is 1 card per turn. I don't know what to give a better name for the for this category. It's not really auto include, but it's like it's very strong point for provision. I still think this is depressingly bad. Could be nerfed. No, I don't really think that... it needs to start with the letter A. Okay? Because we have to keep the theme going. It's important. The aesthetics of this are very important. We'll put it on the bottom end of the auto include. Because she's like... This is a very strong card, but it kind of requires a special type of deck to take advantage of it. This is Corixus. This is a stupid card. A bit strong, G. No. Always good. Always, yeah. Always needed. Something like that. Always picked. There you go. Pick that gym class. We need another category. And this is going to be easy nonsense. And that I reserve for cards like Egleus. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Lemon, but I gotta do it. What does this guy do again? Yarpin? Is that Yarpin or is it Gabor? Gabor. Gain resilience. Yeah, nobody plays this. Not even in a dwarf deck. This is basically balanced. I mean, it's only really played in the Dragons deck, but it's fine. It's an 8 for 9. It's a 7 for 9 with some perks. Vanadane, yeah, you always pick it. This guy's basically balanced. So Corixis is like a card that, if not answered, can play for 60 billion points. Because every time you play a relic, she creates a card that is guaranteed to proc Harmony. Interestingly, that card is actually a nature card. So if you really want to be greedy with your Symbiosis, stick this in there and play some relics. Of course, Malayan goes in the Malayan category. If you don't know, because you've never seen this card, and no one will blame you if you haven't, Malayan is one of those cards that's been around forever, and this is the definition of getting power crept. She's 9 provisions, 4 power, and she can either damage 4 cards by 1 or damage 1 card by 4. So she's like an 8 for 9, if there's targets to hit. And this has to be 4 different enemy units, I'm pretty sure. So you can't like damage the same unit twice. You can't kill like a 1 and a 2 and then like do another 1 damage to a third unit. No, you gotta hit 4 different targets, or just hit 1 target by 4. It's kind of silly. Eldane. Honestly, he used to be cheesy nonsense. Now he's kind of balanced, just because they like made traps not really playable as a unitless deck. I mean, you can. They reworked the spring mechanic to where if you drop a trap next to an existing artifact, it's automatically flipped. So that has really put a damper in unit decks, but mostly, honestly, it's that those decks can no longer win round 1. Like, I think if they change the ambush mechanic back, I still don't think you'd see a lot of traps right now. I think they've just gotten a bit power crept. Shiru's kind of, honestly, Shiru's a bit of a cheesy nonsense. Like, ever since they reworked Guerrilla Tactics, Shiru's just gotten like Guerrilla Tactics is just there to set up Shiru, and then the whole game you're playing against them, you have to be like paranoid around not setting it up, not giving them a good Shiru, and you have to like try and guess what power it's been buffed to, either by Dana or like an offering or something, and it's just like, it's pretty toxic. I'm not saying it's not skillful. It is skillful and, you know, like very strong, but it's like sometimes there isn't a lot you can do to play around it, but just in general, it feels like ever since they reworked Guerrilla Tactics to be 3 boosts, it's kind of taken a lot of skill out of Shiru. Because you just drop it and you can reach 3, 6, 9, 12. Like, if you have Scenario on the board, it boosted by 3. If you have Dana, it boosted by 2, I think? Or is it 3? Shiru? Scenario boosted by 3. Dana boosted by 2 if it's the only elf. And all that's fine. Like, playing a miner to set it up, damaging enemy units to put them in Shiru range, all that's perfectly fine. What I find slightly cheesy is when you can drop this and leader it 3 times and kill a 12. Like, okay. I guess so. Like, but that's mostly me being salty about the Guerrilla Tactics rework. I think it was much better when it was 2 damage and 2 boost, offensive and defensive. Nowadays, you almost never want to use it offensively, which is pretty annoying. They did all that because Milva decks were too strong, and instead of addressing like the fundamental source of the issue, they just butchered my leader. Shira, Goliath, and win, yeah. Can happen if it pulls out like a Great Oak or something. Or worse, a Gezrus. Wait, where's Gezrus? Yeah, he's not even cheesy nonsense. He's just depressingly bad. And the main reason Gezris is bad is because of the adrenaline. Like, by the time you get him going, like, either it's round 3 and your opponent's going to instantly kill it, or it's round 1 and they can pass, or, like, I mean, even if it wins, you spend 12 provisions on it. Like, it's not a card you want to play round 1. Okay, Elias. This is kind of an underrated card, but mostly because it's been squeezed out of the playable range of cards by how, like, prescriptive new card designs have become, right? Like, there's no like, this is a cool card in a deck that plays like 1 power units, right? Like a Dwarven Skirmisher. But, like, an Elven Deadeye is not really that impressive anymore unless you played Angus. But if you play Angus, you already saw the deck you're playing. So, and you're not putting a Dwarven Skirmisher in an Angus deck because Reordain requires an elf next to a trap. So, like, it's become so niche, so that the niche is basically non-existent. But in terms of raw point value, this plays at, 6 plus 5, 11 for 9. It's not bad, but it's 3 bodies, right? Kind of like how Zoltan has 3 bodies. How would I balance this? Make it 8 provisions to start, and then, I don't know, it would have been cool if they had changed it to boost each of the Deadeyes by 1 or something. Or spawn 3 Deadeyes. I don't know. Like, if it was going to stay at 9 provisions. But I think at 8, this will see some play. It's a conditional 11 for 9, while cards like actually play 11 for 7 with no condition or setup required. Yeah, that's part of it. But, like, at 8, the thing is, like, spawning 2 units on a row has uses for cards like Great Oak or Gezris or Catwitcher Mentors, or Gatan. Or those bronzes that boost by the number of elves on a row, which used to see play, but don't anymore because tricksters are better and less conditional and don't need a long round. Like, it's just yeah. I think, this losing a provision, maybe even 2. The problem is, if this ever becomes good enough to play, it will be good enough to play with Heist, and then it becomes stupid, right? Because Heist makes everything dumb. Angus synergy? Right, like I said, in an Angus list, you don't have room for this. So, that's where this is at. It's kind of depressingly bad. Yorvith is actually pretty strong card. The main problem right now with Yorvith is that he's very strong on 1 trap. And that trap is Deception. Because you play this in an Angus deck, right? And let's say you've only played Angus once. That means this trap is 12 points. Yorvith replaying it is basically 12 points plus a 6 power body. So you pay 2 extra provisions compared to this, and you get this plus 6. 6 extra points for 2 is really good. Plus, Yorvith has like utility. Like, Yorvith can replay a Serpent Trap. Like, your opponent opens Defender, you Serpent Trap, and then they open like some Kelly, and then you Yorvith the Serpent Trap and replay it. Whatever, right? Like, it lets you repeat a Serpent Trap. Against Nilfgaard, against Calvitex, Pitfall can be devastating because you know what provisions they have left usually, and you know when to put it down so that, like, they're forced to drop their really good card on it, and then you do it again because the next card is Torres or Artaud. It took the place of my boy Hattori, Ivar Hattori, which used to play spawn and play Gold Trap from your deck. But when they added the new traps, I think they felt like this would have been broken with them. So they changed this from 9 provisions to power to 6 and 6, and now nobody ever plays this. In a world where Heist exists, I'm scared to buff elves. Exactly. Heist on Malayan when? Never. So, like, I wanted to play the Semi-Golden Necker movement deck. But it was like, you had to have the Serpent Trap on the board and then play this. And it was like too many conditions. Like so many times it would have been good, and then sometimes it just wasn't good. Like, you just need too many traps to just make this an always viable card. But, like, you're never going to want to play this on an Incinerating Trap. So it's just kind of stuck. Not to mention that when you pick up a trap and replay it, the opponent almost always knows what you're doing. Like, I think in their head, the devs had this idea of like traps being like these like, ooh, I don't know what it is. It could be an incinerating, could be a pip, but they just never got fleshed out enough for it to serve that function. It only enabled like cheesy unit stacks, and there wasn't this like mental chess game going on between the two players. You weren't like faking your because just that stuff just doesn't work in Gwent. One card per turn, limited provisions, etc., etc. Like, you don't have the flexibility to just like do the wrong thing just because it's not what your opponent expects. Like, if you do the wrong thing, you just lose because you did the wrong thing. The right thing is almost always obvious against good players, and so they'll assume you did that, and if you didn't, well, you lose because you did the wrong thing. All right, this guy, I think that's Yarpin. Yarpin Zigrin, 9 provision, 6 power. Deploy damage an enemy unit by 3. Okay, so it comes in as a 9 for 9. And then at the end of the turn, lose armor and boost stuff by that much. So it's like a passive turning armor into points engine. Think of it like a Marauder that happens every turn. Well, not really Marauder, because Marauder targets something else. But like, think of this as like a self-targeting Marauder that fires off every turn. So like, really... like, sure, when you play it, if you're using the Dwarf Leader, you know, he'll play as a 10 for 9, which isn't that good, but it's something. Because of 3, if this was like 4 damage, hell yeah, because there's a lot of things that you can kill at 4 that like you want to kill, but 3 damage is kind of a... What are you killing with that? Yu-Gi-Oh gameplay. Like, yeah, like if this was 4 damage and see more play, would you place at 8 provisions? I struggle to think of the deck where this would get played. Like, yeah, put this next to Wagon Birds or something, and sure, your tempering is now 2 more points. And Armor's Workshop, but it loses the armor, right? Whereas like the Marauder, you're not losing the armor. When you play a Marauder, you just boost yourself by the allied, but that unit's, you know, armor, and that unit still gets to keep its armor, so you can still drop a Cranmer next to it. In this Cranmer, where you at? This card. So like, as long as Yarpin is losing its armor, it's just not gonna see play. Yo, RC, I'm doing like a thing right now. We can talk about that after we're done with this segment, if that's all right. Because it's going to be on YouTube, and I don't want it to be like all over the place. This is depressingly bad. It's not as bad as Milayan, because Milayan is an 8 for 9, and this is like a 9 for 9 plus a passive engine. Like, it's still way better than Milayan, but it's almost Milayan territory. And then we have Aileron, which is a card that pops out of it's like think of it like a Hubert or Knickers or whatever that pops out of the deck when you have 5 elves. But this is very predictable. So this is incredibly strong because it's 5 tempo for 8 provisions, and you know, 1 thinning that just comes out when you have 5 elves, which is not that difficult. So it can really help an elves deck that wants tempo. My problem with it is that it's like elves only, so it kind of, again, because of how limited elves are right now, it kind of limits what decks I can play it in. Like, it's not here because of Heist, but as far as points for provision, this is like benching 220, you know? This is a pretty badass card. Also, the art is really cool. I mean, I'm a little biased on that front, but... Where is she? There you go. Look at that. Let's get it premium. 800 powder. Look at that. Look at that sword. The sunset. I don't even know what these are. Looks like some dude's head. You don't even care. Right? 10 out of 10 art. Okay. The little gnome that could. Barnabas Beckenbauer. 8 provisions, 5 power, boost an elf, dwarf, and dryad by 3. So this is a 14 for 8. 14 for 8. That's insane. What other 14 for 8s are there in the game? This is like best case scenario of 13 for 8, but it requires a full row? That one only requires 3 units. This, if you have a dragon in hand, can be like a Geralt, but I mean, like, these are the other 8 provision cards. You know? Is there even a 14 for 9 in the game? Like, you gotta go to 10 provision before you see a real 14. But it sees no play. Why is that? Well, because their dwarves must be played in dwarf deck because of the barricade thing that like 80% of the good dwarves have. Because rather than like addressing the fact that Zoltan and Monroe were too strong in a mid-range scoia'tael deck, they just made them unplayable in a mid-range scoia'tael by giving them stupid barricade conditions. Because they were played like in a Renfree, Guerrilla Tactics, Milva, Harmony deck just for giga points, right? And then elves are now locked into like the Deadeye sphere of like elves, heist, elves, reordained Angus, elves. Okay. And then dryads are all symbiosis. You play 2 in Harmony, but like in Harmony, there's a better elf. In Harmony, you play, better gnome. You play this gnome. Because the proactive play has armor, boost by 2 per turn, requires an answer. This is the finisher, but Harmony already has 6 other finishers. They got the Bird Guardian, they got Dana, right? They got Shiru, they got Symbiosis into like double backup plans is often played in Harmony. So like, and this has too low a floor. It has a floor of 5. Symbiosis doesn't have a floor of 5, right? Dana doesn't have a floor of 5. And yeah, they're more expensive, but like the closest competitor to the gnome is this Weeping Willow. And you're playing this because it's a poison or boost by like 12. And is really good. In a medium-sized round, this is more points, but like how, you know what I mean? It's like, by the time you're ready to play this, you're also ready to pass. You can play him in movement list, but it requires shit to stick. You can't play him in movement list. I've tried. Like, because having this in your deck means now you have to have a Dryad in both round 1 and round 3, because you need to be able to drop him. And like, you're playing 2 Dryads most in a movement deck, unless you're playing the Poison Girls. And if you're playing too many Dryads, then your Isengrim becomes unreliable, right? It's just a very awkward card. And so, I don't know that I want to buff this card either. It's just a very low floor, high ceiling. Can we make it 6 power? Sure. Maybe that will be better. Like, all these cards in here could use a power buff, but yeah, the card itself is not bad. It's just that it doesn't fit into any decks at the moment. Brehen. I think Brehen is basically balanced. Again, he's kind of suffering from the fact that Guerrilla Tactics, like, you used to save 1 leader charge to set up Brehen, and it felt bad that you were damaging something and then killing it anyway, like destroying, because he doesn't destroy. But he has adrenaline. So, like, you know, I'm putting him in this depressingly bad. Because, I mean, I think he's better than Gezrus. But, like, if someone plays Torres or Dana or Tyr, you can't use this to kill it. The opponent has to have 3 units on a row before you can kill it. So it's a tall punish, but a conditional tall punish. Like, if I'm playing my tall punish as my last card instead of Heatwave or Spore or something, then I need to, like that, but I also have to save a leader for it. Like every deck every Guerrilla Tactics deck has other good uses for the leader charge, and having to save one just so you can like, you're better off just playing a heat wave, because think of this as like -2, right? Because you have to save a leader for it. I mean, Wolfsbane is better than this. Wolfsbane is 8 provisions and sets the power of an enemy unit to 1. Like, this to me, this is just bad. If you guys disagree, like, by all means, say something. All right, what's next? Okay, this is... I'm not saying this should be nerfed or anything. It's just very fucking good. And it has to, like, to the point where people are playing bad Zoltans just to run this card. What does it do? At the start of the game, infuse a random... This is Eudora Breckenriggs. I'm going to try and remember saying the name of the cards for people who are listening. Eudora Breckenriggs says, at the start of the game, infuse a random Zoltan in your deck with, in quotes, when this card appears on the battlefield, spawn Eudora to the right and boost her by 1 for each Zoltan in your starting deck. That's a mouthful, but usually people just play Zoltan Warrior and have this in their deck. This is like a Knickers that you can't brick. You never have to, you know exactly when it comes out, similar to how you know when Roach comes out. But this comes out only when Zoltan is played, except it gets thinned at the start of the game. It banishes itself at the start of the game. So you end up with a 24 card deck, which means you never draw this in round 1 and you never brick it. And every one of your other cards is 4% more likely to be drawn, like that you want. So it's like an overall consistency buff for your entire deck. Kind of the same way the Musicians of Blaviken is ridiculously good. But it's a little bit unintuitive for people to understand why this is like twice as good as a Knickers or 3 times as good. And then the way it ends up actually working is when you play your Zoltan, it spawns to the right of it and it goes to 3. If you happen to have more than one Zoltan, sure, it will go to 4 or 5, but I mostly see it played in decks with 1, sometimes 2 Zoltans. If only Radovid could have his leader ability. I mean, honestly, if they just gave Radovid Zeal, I would consider it borderline OP. My biggest problem with Radovid Judgment is that in the stockpile deck, I always want to play Henselt last, which is when I want to use my leader charges, which is when Radovid comes out. So it's... I don't know what to do about that. I don't know if I'm supposed to like float a siege support or something to give Radovid Zeal when it pops out so I can get the extra 5 points, but it's so clunky to have a finisher have an order. Why? Especially a finisher that requires you use all your leader charges. So even if you're playing Inspired Zeal and it comes out, you can't use your Inspired Zeal on it because if you had a charge, you wouldn't be out. Lyra, you're like an expert on thinning. How would you describe how strong this is compared to Knickers? Like, if you were to give them numbers or something, like... I'd be curious to see if you'd give it a number value, like what percentage more likely you're to get your cards or something. Okay. Next card is Freshnit, which is another mid-tier scoia'tael card. Is it 7p? Where is it at? Did I miss it? Oh, there it is. So, Zeal order arranged. Spawn a young dryad on this row. Cooldown 4. But if you're devotion at the end of your turn, reduce the cooldown by addition of vitality on self. It's a mouthful. Basically, if you put vitality on this guy, he can spawn out young dryads like no tomorrow. Which means if you're facing this and you want to contest around, you gotta kill it, or they'll have basically infinite symbiosis, which is a lot of points. That being said, no one's really playing it devotion symbiosis, so doesn't really see a lot of play. And yeah, you're gonna give it vitality, so it's gonna be minimum 6 power. I think it's basically, you know, like It's not a card that's like you're like, oh my god, I had to play my freshen it. But it's very good in a long round, and opponents kind of has to deal with it. Yeah, Eudora and Musicians improve your draws in round 1. Honestly, like, I wish that instead of like printing stronger and stronger cards, they just made like Gwent decks 24 cards or something. That would have been cool. Or give us extra mulligans. I don't know. I get that always having all your stuff feels bad. But like, if you invest in like 4 or 5 thinning, it feels really bad to miss your win con. Like, really bad. Okay. Valve. This is like broken good in Symbiosis, just because of like playing Tempest or playing Call of the Forest into something else that's also still a nature card. Like the amount of tempo you can get if you have Aquin or a Fledgling on the board and you play this into a Naiad or into Isengrim or whatever, it's just so many points. But in other decks, it's an 8 for 2 tutor, so I'm just gonna put it in basically balanced. And any like perceived ridiculousness that you see from this is just because of how Symbiosis works. There's Isengrim. This card boosts all your elves by 1. It's basically in every elves deck, usually. It's a very good card. Some people cut it because you need some, but like, honestly, if you're playing Verno, if you're playing Simless, if you're playing Vanadane, Isengrim's like always getting value. It's 8 provisions and it's 6 plus a number of elves. So even if you have just like 6 Deadeyes, it's still a 12 for 8. Very, very good. Plus it has a passive, but the way I see the passive is it means you can open with it or finish with it. So it's something I really like about Isengrim, because there's cards like there are cards that are sort of a finisher, but you feel like you almost never get to play them last, because usually your finisher is something like Verno or Simless or Heatwave or something like that, right? Your last card. This is a card that you can play like 2 or 3 cards before last and know that if it's not removed, it will act as if you played it last. So it's kind of nice. There's a lot of these like medium tier golds and like low provision bronzes that are sometimes pseudo finishers, where it always feels awkward to hold on to them in round 3. And what am I thinking? There's a card I'm thinking of that's like that. Bronze. I think it's a Nilfgaard card. I think it's one of the soldiers that sees like no play. Is it standard? Am I thinking of Standard Bearer? Yeah. Boost self by 1 for each boosted enemy unit. You know what I mean? Like, this only works on deploy, but it's a 4P bronze. If this was a mid-tier gold and worked more like Seditious Aristocrats, Seditious Aristocrats on deploy boost themselves by 1 for each spying enemy unit, and then whenever an enemy unit gets spying, boost self by 1. Like, that means that like if you play them in the middle of the round, assuming you're not removing enemy units or enemies not purifying their spying units, you still get all the points, right? You don't have to play it as your first card. Because in Gwent, a lot of times, like, when I'm playing it, awkwardness, I feel awkward. Like, certain engine cards, you like, there's like 6 cards you want to play as your first card because they all benefit from each other. And then there's some cards that like you want to play all of them as your last card. And then in the middle, there's like, I guess I have to play this now. There's not a lot of cards that want to be or are okay with getting played in the middle. Bird Guardian is like ridiculously strong, except it's only ridiculously strong because of Chameleon. If you ever tried playing like Guardian in decks other than that don't have Chameleons or the Corexus like Dana Harmony leader combo, this ends up not being that big. It's still very big for an 8 provision card, but it's kind of like the payoff for that archetype, I guess. So like, you know, but if you're playing a Harmony deck, you're running this. It's just weird to me that you have these 8 provision finishers. Like, I feel like, you know, like this is basically Regis minus 6 points for 5 less provisions, which is a lot less. Like Regis is 9 effective provisions lost. This is 4. This is half the cost of Regis. And it's like the same thing minus the drain. Plus it's, you can proc this multiple times a turn. This will usually be bigger than Regis. It's like playing Caranthia without Frost? I disagree, Kareem. Because Harmony is something that, like, to me, like in my ideal scoia'tael game, if you're playing a deck with mixed races, you're achieving Harmony. So if you're playing a mid-range deck that has dwarves and elves and dryads and, you know, machines and constructs and whatever, like, cool. You're doing the thing. And you should have the payoff of this card for your show round. Like, take my Mentors deck, right? It runs a gnome, it runs a beast, it runs elves, dryads, witchers, dwarves. Like, and I've run like Harmony cards in it, a human Milva, and like, and it suffers a short round. And so I tried playing this in there, thinking, oh well, it's gonna work. But without chameleons, it just doesn't, and it just makes me sad because. Like, every time you have this kind of interaction where this thing makes that other thing really strong and without it, it sucks, it just limits deck building. Like, I would have preferred that this was like once per turn, but it boosts by 2 or something. Or whatever the number is to make, or like have a higher base power, I don't know. So that like you're not dependent, like, because against Nilfgaard, you don't want to even have your chameleon on the board because it's just terrible to let Nilfgaard copy your chameleons. And so it just creates this weird variance where the between the floor and the ceiling of the card. And also, yeah, I don't like Caranthia Golden Child either. I think it's a boring design. Well, to be clear, it's a lot more interesting than this and Regis because it's only the last 5 turns and your opponent can counterplay it because it's about damage being done. So if they don't have units on a row, your Caranthia's not growing and they know that and they can maybe math out how big your Caranthia Golden Child could be. And so you have this varying reach card in your hand or deck that you could play at any time. That's a lot more interesting to me than this thing, which is like passively grow every time you proc Harmony. Okay. All right. Then we got Pavko Gale. So this recently got buffed and received a Harmony tag, but it does come down as 5. If you have a chameleon on the board and you play this and you click the chameleon, it goes to 6 immediately. And it does 2 damage a turn, although it is Rolock. So it's pretty strong. If your opponent doesn't remove it right away, it plays for a ton of points. The turn that you... And crucially, he's human. Mithril is garbage because the turn that you play it plays for 6 right now. And then it's 2 per turn if you have dominance, right? This is 2 per turn if you don't have any non-neutral units on the board, which is a lot easier to do than... Because roughly, just on average, half the time your opponent should have dominance, half the time you have dominance, right? So that's what Nithril's condition is. This guy's condition, you have control over, which is you didn't put these like non-scoia'tael units in your deck. So you have a lot more agency in whether or not this condition is met. And then because it boosts every time you play like something that procs Harmony, it is really more than 2 points a turn. It can almost be 3 points a turn. And 5 plus 3 a turn for 8 provisions. Pretty good, right? Pretty good. It's like a Sol. In that level, except that you can't pass and have this keep growing, whereas Sol keeps growing. But with all that, it still seems like no play. And I don't necessarily want to make this 6 power because like cards like Sol that grow so fast, like, or cards that just do like 3 points a turn are very dangerous to buff outside of removal range. And yes, warriors can remove everything at 7, 8, 9 power, whatever. But not everybody else can. And I think 6 is like I don't know. Maybe this should be 6, but like, if you put it at 6, you have to kill it the turn that it's played. There are some combos that require 2 turns, like using a Dwarven Skirmisher plus Zoltan, right? And so, but this could go to 7 next turn and 8 the turn after that. So I'm kind of torn on this one, but yeah. Riptide can remove nerf Riptide, nerf. Provision buff at 7p. Yeah, I can see it. It's like Dunka at 7. I can see this at 7 provisions. Makes sense. Sheldon. I think Sheldon is cheesy nonsense. You may notice I have a lot of hand buff stuff in the cheesy nonsense section because I think hand buff archetype is cheesy nonsense, primarily because torque is random, and whether or not you have Sheldon in your hand can decide the game, and I think that's nonsense. It's also uninteractive. It's in your hand. What's the opponent going to do about it? Like, I can't, short of like Schiller, there's no way for me to touch it. So I just think it's, is it a strong card? Yes. Is it basically always gets picked in gym class? Yes. That's where it, from a power level, that's where it belongs, but I'm putting it in cheesy nonsense because I really hate the mechanics of hand buff. Same with torque. This used to be like, it wasn't guaranteed to start in your hand unless you were devotion, which is another example in a long line of examples of why devotion as a balancing mechanic is garbage. It is terrible. It is terrible. Forcing binary decks to be even more binary is no. Yep. And then we have over here Toruvio. This has like a melee and a range, and it sets the it does damage to both ends of the row for scoia'tael. Where are you at? Right here. But if you have a Deadeye, then you get both effects. So really, this is almost exclusively played in a Deadeye deck, nowhere else, because otherwise it's like 4 and maybe like 6 or 7 or 8. It just has too low a floor in a short round. And like, you're not really killing anything by damaging it by 2, so it's more of a point slam card. But even in Elves decks, people have started cutting it. And that's not so much because it's a bad card, but it's like, just has no room. There's no space for it. So maybe it could like be 7 provisions. I think Gerd is 7 provisions, and this is pretty similar to Gerd for me. Werecat, and is kind of similar. A lot of these like row damage cards have gotten power crept. I don't know if Lacerate used to be more and got like made cheaper or what, but yeah. Dunka is fine. It's a Dryad, buffs cards in your hand, has a click. Like, the main issue with Dunka is that like it has Veil, and so on like blue coin, if they give it TA, you basically have to tall punish it, or they're building carryover. But it's 1 per turn, so I'm kind of okay with it. I don't like it when it's with like torque and stuff, because it just becomes too much carryover, and too much carryover is always bad. Because it like breaks one of the tenets of Gwent, in my opinion. Dennis Kramer is like stupid strong. It just is. Like, it's not hard to put like 10 armor on 2 units in Gwent right now. And so this plays as like 27 points for 7. What the hell is that? Yeah, I know it takes setup and yada yada yada, and they played Symbiosis and Armor's Workshop, but those cards are decent points on their own. Even before the Cranmer, you would still play them. This is like, oh, you let me do this? Well, now I get to do this. Like, you let me have 40 points? Well, I guess I get 80 points now. Kick W, like, or 67 or whatever. It's just a ton of points. And there's a lot of decks that are built around using this. Like the Shiru scoia'tael mid-range deck basically throws in a bunch of answers and control, and it gets to do that because it does a Seamless into Workshop with Cranmer and Mahaka Pass as its like point slam. So it invests almost all its energy into like messing with you, but then it still has points because of this. Now, that's most control decks do something similar, right? Warriors have Sov and Tyr. You know, Nilfgaard has Assimilate procs and Stefan, or you know, Ramon into Sergeants. Even like my unitless Deathwish deck has, you know, that laugh with 2 leader charges at the end, with Dagon coming out maybe. Like there's just a lot of most control decks invest a lot in control and then have some sort of big point slam finisher at the end. But this is like too good for a 7p card, to be honest. I'm not, again, just because I say something is very strong doesn't mean I'm saying it should be nerfed. I'm just saying it's one of the strongest cards in the game, point per provision wise. Gatan is one of my favorite cards because it's conditional, takes setup, and then there's a huge payoff. But like, for this to get value, you have to have a full row of units and cards that benefit from being moved. This just requires 2 cards with armor. Like, it's so much harder to disrupt this, especially since in order to disrupt it, you have to remove the armor from those units, and the way to remove armor is by damaging them, which means you already got the payoff from the armor anyway. So, you know. Yeah, the other thing about Kramer, chat's pointing out, is the points go to 2 cards, not just 1. So tall punish doesn't negate. Like, they can play Kramer, and if you tall punish 1, the other one's still very tall. You can play Iris, yeah. I think Gord is perfectly balanced. I think Gord is a finisher / tempo card for special heavy decks, and I think everyone who complains about Gord being capped is just wrong. They point out other cards that don't have a cap, like, but Gord has to have a cap. Gord has to have a cap because nobody can stop you from playing specials, okay? There's no counterplay to my opponent played specials. And especially since, like, a lot of specials, like, a lot of control comes from specials, having a very, like, have an unlimited point slam finisher for 7 provision. Like, Gord 15 for 7 is very good. Axel is 11 for 7, and everybody talks about how good that card is. This is 15 for 7. Come on. Stop it. Stop that nonsense. Yeah, so it only has to be played in round 3. Sure, great, fine. But that's called balance. Like, it has a trade. There's a trade-off. You can't play it in round 1, but it plays for more points. It was too easy to get a 25-point Gord for 7p. Yeah, I remember when scoia'tael was a thing. I played against it. It was awful. Because they would play like Simless into orbs and then replay the orbs and play sorts and all these other things. I know, it's just one of those things that like Twitch chat likes to talk about. Oh, but Gord is still capped. People sad. Like, no, you're bad at math. And they're like, well, how come this other card isn't capped? That's playing as a 16 for 7 or 25 for 7. Oh, Thirsty Dame is playing for 40 points this game, but Gord is still capped. Those are not finishers. Those have to be on the board and can be answered. This is, Gord was basically, you had to get last say against those decks or you lost. 100% every time. It was win round 1 or lose the game. That's not the same as like a Thirsty Dame or Messenger or an Oriana or whatever boosting to infinity. Because those can be answered, they can be locked, they can be tall punished. Gord couldn't unless you had last say. And it was always the last card being played. So it's a big fucking difference. Again, and all those other cards require other things happening on the board which you interact with. Yes, I know about priestesses and I know Military is a card, but I'm just saying, in general, most of the cards that people point at and say, see, but how come Gord has to be balanced, are nothing like Gord. They're nothing like Gord. They're just completely different things. You're comparing apples with like container trucks. Okay. Immune Milva. This card received a lot of fanfare when it got reworked, and then 2 months later, nobody was playing it. Is it strong? Can be if you have other movement engines. But if you have other movement engines, you're already getting a lot of points per turn. It's like a win more. And no, it's not like a sentry. A sentry is 1 point per turn for every card that moves. This is 1 point per turn for every card that moves, but a sentry buffs the cards that are moving, and so therefore protects your engines. And the opponent has counterplay by locking the sentry or killing the sentry. This is immune, so it's got limited counterplay. But instead of boosting those engines, it boosts itself. So it's like, not the best design, but it's not really cheesy because without those other cards on the board that can be interacted with, it would never get points. So it's not cheesy. I think that it could be buffed, and the way that I would buff it is by either making it 6 provisions or increasing its base power by 1. Because I think the biggest problem with this card is that its floor is too low. Honestly, I preferred when this was just an immune card that got buffed every time you played a unit. This, like, every time cards move is kind of weird to me. Yeah, I'm also not a fan of the immune tag, personally, obviously. Like, I'd rather this have, like, Veil and 5 armor than immune. Like, if you really have to make it, you know, hard to kill. But I think, you know, I think there's a place, like, I know people don't like uninteractivity, but I think there is a place in Gwent and should continue to like, we should continue to allow a place for decks that, like, counter control by not giving them things to hit. Like, I think it's good that, like, Blaze of Glory falls apart if you don't give it a target. Like, I think that's an like, it's not fun when you're the Blaze of Glory player running into that. But that's why Pretzel of Fury is more versatile, right? There's a less polarized version of that type of deck that exists. And you can play cards like Gird that give you targets, right? Or Sove or Kraken or whatever. Like, you can create your own targets. And you're choosing not to, and then complaining when an opponent doesn't give you any targets. Like, I think there are, like, interesting decks that, like, use Tiger and Milva and traps, and then, you know, have, like, the last 2 or 3 turns give them a lot of points. There is an aspect of that asymmetrical warfare that I think is interesting. What I didn't like was the unitless decks that just played only traps, and then last turn play Eldain and have a bunch of points. Like, that wasn't fun. But, like, going a bit uninteractive because you think that the last 3 cards you can get enough points to catch up is a lot more interesting to me than like, I play trap, I play trap, I play trap, I play Eldain. Nilva's complete fight movement have other problems? Can you explain what other problems movement have? This Tiger also got buffed. It got changed to 6 power, but it still sees almost no play because you have to click it every turn, and so it doesn't allow you to, like, tempo pass and stuff. And then it doesn't have Zeal unless there's a Dryad, so even though it's like a 2 damage a turn engine, you have to wait a while. And then movement, ever since Guerrilla Tactics got changed to do 1 damage to enemy units, like, you can't combo this with the leader to kill a 4. You, like... So I tried playing, like, a Povko plus board deck, but then, like, you have to play both of them, and then it takes a while for them to get going. It's like they either kill nothing or they kill everything, and it's just... Their engines are too easy to be removed. Yeah, but you have to be able to remove their engines, otherwise they'd be OP. Like, the answer to movement engines never stick is well, nerf Highland Warlords, because that's what's removing them. What other decks remove every movement engine? I mean, Pirates, right? Pirates and Warriors. That's it. Nilfgaard doesn't remove them. Nilfgaard just makes more of them because Obsidian Mirror is a card, and for 4 provisions, they get 3 movement engines. Ha 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 ha. So balanced, so good. Siege, yes. Siege can remove them too. But not really. Because except for, like, those, you know, scary Siege players who play, like, a Boiling Oil. Oh my god. Have you met those? And there's some that even play 2. Like, those are a nightmare to play against. But the ones that don't play Boiling Oils, which is, like, most of them because they all abuse Mutagenerator and Boiling Oil doesn't have carryover abuse written all over it, those guys usually can't do 5 damage in 1 turn until they get going. But movement engines also can get going. So, like, it's kind of a weird, like, arms race. Usually, movement engines versus Siege is like who has blue coin. Because the TA makes a difference. Like, you TA a sentry, then everything else lives. You're the 2 oil player. Who hurt you? Sentries can see 1 power buff, so you'd have to use 6 damage to kill them? No. I would love for sentries to get, like, 2 have 2 armor maybe, but they should still like die to offering and toad and things like that. Yeah, I don't play mutagener either, Hexon. Okay. We have up next is Syrsa. Damage an enemy unit by 2. Oh, as far as like how I would buff tree, I'd make it 6 provisions. I think at like coming down as an 8 for 6 and then 2 per turn is okay for a 6. I would also buff like the beast to 6 provisions. I think this is similar to the beast in terms of power and stuff. I think 7 is too expensive. It's just not worth 7 provisions. Too low a floor and takes too long for payoff. Like, when you have cards like Sergeant at 6 provisions, right? Like, this takes like 3 turns to get 10 points, and it's 7 provisions. Okay. Yes, I know there's other synergies with movement, but ultimately, like, the healing thing doesn't end up doing much. Because if they're gonna kill it, they're gonna kill it. No one's like doing 3 damage to this, and the next turn they're gonna do 3 more damage. Like, it's just, that's not the Gwent game we play. Takes 4 turns? No. It's 6 body. The first turn you play it, you can't click, and then 2 more turns. So it's 3 turns to do 10 points. How's it taking 4 turns? Plus, if you have a Dryad, it only takes 2 turns. Redo your math, Colin. I know you're the champion of the weekly tournament. But even you can make mistakes. All right, Syrsa, Dryad. Oh, actually, you're right. Yes, I know. I'm always right. Never made a mistake in my life. Except when I started to play Gwent. Harmony. Damage an enemy unit by 2, then boost a random unit in your hand. So this is like a Frankenstein card. The closest I can think of is like Old Katakan. Old Katakan, if you don't remember, was 5 power. Spawned like a 2 power Ekimara. Katakan had a Thrive. And then had a Death Wish that it would spawn another Ekimara. Maybe it was a 3 power Ekimara. I'm not sure. But, it was this weird, like, vampire, Death Wish, Thrive hybrid. And this is a Harmony, hand buff, damage card. So it's like, it's kind of like Circle of Life. If you get a Death Blow, you get to pick what you're buffing. And in theory, that's, like, cool and everything. But in practice, why would you use this when you can just play a Harvest or a 4 provision card that buffs something in your hand? So this is like, I don't know how much you'd have to buff this to like get for it to get value, but you're not playing a Harmony engine today in any deck other than a Harmony deck. You're just not, unfortunately. And so, like, it's just depressingly bad. This one always gets picked in gym class. We've talked about it before. Xavier Moran. Could be buffed, I guess. But, like, this is kind of a really annoying card because the counterplay to it involves hitting the armor, but it gets armor every time they play a dwarf, which is basically every turn. So it's just a whole bunch of nonsense that essentially means this card is 5+1 a turn. Right? But this exists. Where is it? This guy. Welcome Defender. Barricade, at the end of your turn, boost stuff by 1. This used to say if boosted, boost stuff by 1. Which meant that like you had to find a way to boost it, and then it become an activated engine. And in Gwent, there used to be this pseudo distinction between golds and bronzes in the sense that a bronze kind of was relying on other cards to make it become active, whereas the gold was more independent, right? So you can think of Xavier as an independent version of this, the same way that like the Beast is an independent version of the Piggy. But in practice, those golds are older and they're power crept, and the bronzes are better and have made them obsolete. Nobody plays the Beast because Piggies exist, and nobody plays Xavier because Mahakam Defenders exist. And they both have a condition of barricade. The only difference is Xavier gets armor when you play a dwarf, but like even in a 9-card round, that's 9 armor. That's not enough for a payoff card. So it's like, is it really worth 7 provisions? No. Would I play it at 6? Probably. But it's just kind of a boring card anyway. So like, yeah, it should be buffed, but am I gonna be like, oh boy, Xavier got buff, I can finally play him. It's so boring. He used to double the boost he received? Really? All right, next for Yavin. We talked about this already. I think Yavin's basically balanced. It's kind of cool. My only beef with Yavin is that it reminds me that Oriana doesn't count herself as a vampire when she deploys. So Yavin on deploy will do damage based on the number of elves on a row, which, you know, if you're playing against elves, you kind of know their removal reach is dependent on how many Deadeyes they have. So you can choose to play one of your cards early because they can't Yavin it yet. That's cool. That's an interesting mechanic. And I think at 7 provisions, it's perfectly balanced. Probably one of the stronger 7Ps. Yeah. Thanks, Karma. Time yourself out, please. We're misleading the chat. Okay, Barclay, right? Like, this is 6 provisions. Which is another reason why Xavier doesn't get play. Like, this gives every dwarf armor. So if you were going to play Broover... Where's Broover? It should be here somewhere. Yeah, if you were going to play Broover, you can also play this. Right? Because this gives every dwarf on the board armor, which reactivates your Broover. If they have armor, it boosts them by 1. So it works on 2 rows, and it's 6 provisions, 4 power. It's like way better than Zoltan Scoundrel. Sure, it doesn't... this doesn't give you the flexibility of doing damage like Zoltan Scoundrel does, but honestly, Zoltan Scoundrel is a liability because it creates a card, so Assimilate loves to copy it. This guy isn't that good to copy, and it's 6 provisions. Wait, you actually timed yourself out? How? Oh, use the Vanish command. That's cool. I didn't know we had that. We have the technology. Oh my god, we're so advanced. I should give myself more credit. Okay, next card. Bran. If you control 2 or more allied triads, gain Zeal. Order, damage an enemy unit by 1. Charges 3. So this is like Udalryk, the scoia'tael version. And Udalryk saw no play for that. I mean, even though, yeah, it saw no play. It was basically a meme card. And this one didn't get a rework. So it's like order damage by 1 with 3 charges. This is the kind of card that like used to see play, like you could use it to set up Shiru or Scorch or whatever. But it's like from a long time ago. Right now, like NR has 4 provision cards that do 3 charges that boost by, by 1, which with Onager is really also 3 damage. So like it's just kind of depressingly bad. Yeah, Yarpen's better than these cards. This is probably better than those. Kind of in this order, maybe. No, Gezras is more playable than Yarpen. More played, rather, I guess. Is she Malayan bad? She didn't even have the Zeal at some point? Oh, I see. Okay, chat says yeah, she's melee and bad. Well, at least melee is not alone. Unlike Yaga. So many yeses. Alright, this guy moves and locks is very good card. Perfectly fine. It's a Dorigary with 1 less power, but it moves the enemy unit. So it's kind of like a more flexible lock, which always makes these kind of 6 provision cards better. Like, I don't think Hattori should be buffed either. It's 3 points per trap. But like, you have to play it first and then it has to live. The other cool thing about Hattori is that it buffs another unit. It doesn't buff himself, so he doesn't go tall. But it's like 1 less power is bad as a faction gold lock. 1 less power in exchange for movement. Movement is very good. Like, even if they purify it, it's moved now. A lot of times that like kills the card. So it counters things that can be locked and things that can be moved. And you don't have to run it because there's also Malayan. And there's also Dorigary. So it's like, I mean, you could argue it's like not stronger than some of these cards, but Brehen? No, Brehen. Yeah, Brehen is, I think so. You don't think so, Christoph? I don't like him because he's like, like you have to save a leader charge for it. And it doesn't answer a threat. It's like, why would I play this over Wolfsbane? Like, if I have to move something in order to kill it with this, I just play Wolfsbane and move and kill it. Like, what's the point of this? Just a 4-body? But it's limited to adrenaline. Like, Wolfsbane doesn't have that limitation. They play tier, I Wolfsbane and I move it by 1, it's dead. Or I ping it by 1 with Precision Strike and it's dead. This thing, there has to be 3 units on that row. Or 5. Yeah, ST doesn't have good tall punish. Right? They have, I mean, really, honestly, aside from Nilfgaard, nobody else has good tall punish. Built in, right? SK has a lot of damage cards, and then they have Champion's Charge. Monsters has Imler's Wrath. Okay. Syndicate has Morels, which is pretty good. And Poisons. But Morels like takes coins and whatever, fine. But Nilfgaard has like 7 different tall punishes. Morkvarg? Morkvarg, Hjalmar, Tyr, Junod. Okay, Skellige has lots of tall punish. But aside from Skellige and Nilfgaard, nobody has tall punish. So saying it's these only tall punish isn't really saying anything. You also have Oak, which is like 8 damage. And you have Serpent Trap. And Shiru. Like, and Poisons and, you know, Yavin. And like, there's just a lot of like, and combos. Like, ST in general does a lot of like 2 things together kill a thing. So Cyclops is doing his best. Cyclops is not tall punish. Okay, Atrial Merlega. As you know, I think these could use a buff. And I would just buff these by like 1 power or something. This is one of those like 6 provision Purify cards that have a secondary use. No, their abilities got buffed. Their ceiling went up, but not their floor. Their floor stayed the same. And I think that's the main problem with them, is that their floor is too low. You have to, like, if you have one, it's like a brick without the other. They're like unicorns that you never want to play one without the other, but their floor is too low. because it's like 7 for 6. And when you have a card like Dwarven Skirmisher, which is also a 7 for 4, it kind of makes you never ever want to play those. The problem is this guy right here. Why a 4 provision card has 2 times 3 damage is beyond me. That is insane. Like, NR has this card. Where is it at? Sealess, Sile, whatever. Damage 2, order damage 2. Skirmisher is better than this. It's 4 provisions and it's 3 and 3. Who cares if it's 1 body? Who cares if it has to be deployed on melee? None of that matters. Because the order only requires barricade. So even if you like moved it, it can still be given armor on the ranger and they can click it. Alright. Milena is a pretty good card, to be honest. If it's not answered, it gets a lot of value. But it gets answered. And so some people have suggested like giving it 1 base power. Sure. Just to increase its floor. I know it also makes it harder to remove. But it's a card that doesn't get points without other cards. So you could take care of those cards instead, or you could lock it. I think it would be fair as a 6 for 6. And then here's this, the other ST faction specific lock. Here, we'll put it in basically balanced. Where is it at? Yeah, it already is. My bad. These two are like locks that have a secondary purpose. Function, whatever. This one does damage by 2, or it can lock, depending on which row you put it. And more crucially, these are like, this is Dryad, this is Elf, so Isengrim's Council can tutor them. And so can Call of the Forest. And there are payoffs in scoia'tael for either being Devotion or not having cards of other factions. So the fact that they have 2 different faction-specific locks is pretty good. Harmony? Yeah, oh, and they proc Harmony, yeah. That's another reason why they get play. Because Doragary doesn't proc Harmony. Doragary does count for Saskia, but doesn't proc Harmony. Alright, Poly is like depressingly bad. Like it has an order to move something and has a deploy, right? Did I get that right? Okay, it has a deploy of move and an order to give 2 armor. Like 2 armor is not worth the order, man. Like 6 and a move? That, like, even a Dragoon at least boosts the thing that it moves or damages the thing that it moves. Like, Ollie is so power crept. Hammond. Where's Hammond at? Is 8 provisions, 7 power, and gives like 2 to 4 bleeding. He's kind of like a Detlef in that it wants to have adjacent pirates. So this can be like an 11 for 8, which is the same as Toad and Riptide. But Polly is like a 6 for 6 with 2 armor and a move. Like it's, so this is a move and 11 points, right? Potential, like up to 11 points, which is conditional, but so is Toad, so is Riptide, right? Like 11 is the number on top of the move. Polly is like 6 and a move, and it used to be like, why play Polly because Nivellen exists, but then they went and ruined Nivellen. Nivellen is now like an 8 for some reason, and no one has ever played this card. It's enemy row. It's a neutral card that only applies to enemy. It's move all card. Like, yes, if I can set up 2 sentries on my side of the board and do this, like, okay. So it's just a lacerate with extra steps. Nivellen was getting lots of play, like, before the rework. Nivellen was played in Reavers or as a tech against Reavers. I could play it in my movement deck when it was 6 provisions and 5 power and move 3 adjacent cards. Like, it was pretty cool. I think they looked at it as like, that's why Art doesn't get played, because Nivellen exists. Let's just change Nivellen because he's crowding out Art, and nobody plays Art anyway. One of the last reworks they did, they didn't actually fix the problem with this card, which is that it can only move stuff from melee to ranged and damages them by 2. At least do like damages them by 4 if you're gonna have it be so conditional. So it becomes like a conditional 16 for 9. Like, damage 3 enemy units by 4 would have been interesting. Or by 3. Right? Then we're at 13 for 9, which isn't even like that much of a thing. Arts still don't get play. Yeah, it doesn't get play at all. Anyway, Poly's just depressingly bad. It's like down there. Gnome is balanced. I mean, it kind of sucks when it gets removed, but people play it with like Scenario and Dana and all the other hand buff nonsense, so it doesn't need a power buff. Farseer, one of the most garbage cards they've made. It's just, I hate it. Not that it's not strong, but it's like just unattractive nonsense. I think this Kingslayer is pretty balanced. I generally don't like Resilience all that much. This is also cheesy nonsense because, like, you can't play it against Nilfgaard, or they copy it and because it's the bronze, and then they can illusionist it, and then it's just. I had a Siri Nova once go to like 15 points in my hand because I was against a hand buff player. Not Siri Nova, false Siri. The 1 power guy. I had a 15 power false Siri once. I also call this cheesy nonsense because it's like, you have to answer, you have to answer, you have to answer it. If you don't answer it, it can play for 1,000,000 points. Just so dumb. And Therion, I think, is basically balanced. It's a bit on the strong side, actually. Oh, why am I doing bronzes? I'm not supposed to be doing bronzes. That's later. Okay, Yorvith. I actually think this is depressingly bad. Or cheesy nonsense. Or both. I don't know where to put this. But let me take out the bronzes. Because we're not doing bronzes right now. Heist. Heist is definitely cheesy nonsense. It's very strong cheesy nonsense, but I hate it. It means you have to answer every card. I think Waters could probably get a buff. It saw some play when Harmony was meta. Some people were cutting, you know, like it happens. Something becomes meta. People keep like making a slightly greedier version. But Yorvith's Gambit is 2 random traps, unless you have 6 traps in your starting deck. So actually, it should just go up there in this garbage ass category of type X and deck builder. If you have 6 traps in your starting deck, then you get to pick which 2 traps you tutor. But it's like, you gotta have 2 traps left in deck in a 6 trap deck to play this. And it just gets a little silly. When they rework traps. Novigrad Injustice. Oops. I think could be buffed. I'm not saying it's not good. It's just like, because Cleaver's Muscle got buffed, but still nobody's playing this for 10 provisions, I don't think. The thinning value is not there. You could just play Roach for 9p. Call of the Forest. I think it's basically balanced. It's very strong. Actually. Like, I have changed my decks just so I could use Call of the Forest instead of Decree. Because it's like, that 1 extra point can make a big difference. Feign Death. I think it's balanced. If you forget the stratagem exists, which is one of the stupidest things in the game, that you can play Scenario and click this, then Feign Death is balanced because you can heat wave it and it does stuff. Lock Feign, on the other hand, is just giga broken. Just one of the stupidest things. Like, I don't know, maybe Dana is stupider. Like, I think this is a fair card, though. I don't think this needs a nerf. Which scenario? Lock Fane? Yeah. Why is Aquan up there? Because I'm making a separate category just to point out all the like the deck builder automation cards. Like, if you want to play this, you have to put XYZ in your deck. You don't play Aquan unless like 90% of your deck is already mapped out for you. We covered all that at the beginning of this little exercise. Shaping Nature is, I think, depressingly bad, even in a Symbiosis deck. Frogs, basically balanced, I think. Pretty strong, to be honest. But, you know, takes setup and has to have targets. And, you know, they have an order, so they can kill them before the, you know. But how come? The fact that they give plus armor is a little bit stupid. And the fact that people are playing like a dwarf location in Symbiosis and mid-range Shiru just because it's an on-click, like, it's just kind of classic power creep. Isengrim, I love this card. It kind of rewards intelligent deck building, and it's a specialized tutor. It gives you consistency and gives you some reward by boosting the card, but it's got a bit of randomness to it. It's like, this is like the good version of the Naglfar type design. Imagine if Naglfar showed you one of each type of monster you have in your deck. Wouldn't that be cool? Wait, this was released at 15? Oh yeah, it was, because this got released the same time as Renfree, and Renfree was so busted nobody played scenarios. And they were like, oh, I guess the reason is that scenarios need to be buffed. We just printed these cards. We spent a lot of dollars on the art on these cards. Better buff them so they get to see play. Gentle reminder. The reason this is put up here is because you play this and it gets heat waved and you still trade up by 10 points. And if it doesn't get heat waved, it plays for 2 to 3 points per card, which is like an extra 30 points. Not to mention the chapter 2, just the chapter 1 plays for like 20 plus points. This scenario by itself plays for 40 to 50 points in a long round 3. That is insane. That is insane. Feign Death plays for like 15 points. But it lets you like do 2 things at a time. So that's why people play it. And well, mostly because it gives you an extra waylay to be used with Simless. But like, let's say Haunt. It's 14 privileges worth of cards, but it's good because you play a Death Wish unit, it spawns a consumer and you consume it at the same turn. And that is tempo and flexibility that you don't have otherwise. That's what scenarios should do. Scenarios should give you like flexibility and like a second action you can do one time because you invested in a scenario. Scenarios should not shit out points. It shouldn't be like, I played this and you didn't kill it with Heat Wave and trade down 10 tempo, therefore you lose the fucking round. Like, this is the worst kind of scenario. Night scenario is even worse than this because the points curve of this scenario is like this, and then a big bump when you trigger chapter 2, and then this, right? But it's a lot of points, but it's like pretty constant. Night scenario is like nothing, giga million points, holy shit, oh my god, he's ahead by 50. And then like back to medium amount of bullshit. Right? But there's that like burst of when they proc their chapter 2 on the night scenario and proc 5 graces at the same time, and it's just, I hate that scenario so much. It makes every game against Night become so binary because of it. Horn is depressingly bad. It's so bad that people never ever expect you to have it, which you would think would give this some value. But I tried this, and like, even when people like don't respect it, it almost never pays off because it still only plays for 8 points. It's usually not enough to debate them into like losing the game. Bran is not depressingly bad, but Wolfsbane is like better in every scenario. Tell me when you would rather have Bran over Wolfsbane. They play tier, I Wolfsbane it, and I move it once with my Guerrilla Tactics and it dies. Right? This has adrenaline, requires 3 units to be on the row, or 5, if it's early game, and can't answer the most important cards to answer, which are like Tyr and Dana, and if they're not on the far right, You can't, like, you gotta move it to the far right. And if they put everything on one row, you gotta move it up and then move it back down to kill it. It's so conditional. Defender? Again, people can play around this trivially. AP with 4 body? Man, 4 body isn't what it used to be. Like, as far as these cards go, it's one of the good ones. It's one of the playable ones. But I just... You're in a Kecker deck? Not really. Not really. You're not really using a Royal Decree for this. If you are, then you're not using it for Unicorns, or you're not using it for Siri Nova, or... The Miamon Harmonist? Yeah, 6-8 months ago. Not since then. And then even then only Miamon, because he really hates Heatwave for some reason. I think Heatwave is just not interesting enough for Miamon. Miamon didn't play Heatwave in his patch South Fury list. He ran Dagger instead. If it wasn't for Miamon, this card would have seen 0 play in the last year. I mean, I agree that's a controversial pick. That's the one people seem to point out. But I just don't think it's a good card. I think this is one of the better locations in terms of balance because the order is conditional and requires some synergy. So that people who play this just to get an extra Cat Witcher are really like... I mean, you could argue Brand is bad because Heatwave is better, but... You know. This card, like, sees no play almost because... Not because it's bad, but because it's so conditional. And since it's a spell and not a nature card, you can't really tutor it without Oneiromancy or Arcane Tome. And are you really going to use Oneiromancy on the 7-piece special that can get squirreled? And then it's nothing? Plus, like, it only comes out once per round, usually, so you don't have a lot of... You don't have any consumes in scoia'tael, for example, right? Sure, like, you could use Elias. Where's it at? You could use this card to destroy it and then play 2 more specials and have... It's just so much work. Oh, the Witcher locations only see play in Golden Necrolis? Yeah. But that's just a function of the high provision golds in the game being good enough that you want to play them, and therefore you want to play 4 provision cards, not 8 provision cards. But, like, compare this to Kaer Seren or Dol Dulak. No, this is Kaer Seren. Wait, what is it called? What is this location called? This is Stiga Castle, sorry. Like, all 4 of these cards are situationally useful. Right? The fact that you have the flexibility to pick which one you want, is neat. Now, you could argue it should be like 7 provisions. I can see it. But it's a very good card. Whereas, like... And this also, like, all these 4 cards are useful. You could argue that some of these cards could get some buffs. But, like, having the choice of which of these you're going to play is useful. If you compare that to this... Like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck? If Truffle was 9p? I think your point's valid that, like, a lot of these artifacts see play because Golden Necro wants artifacts. But I don't know that Truffle would instantly replace them. Like scoia'tael bonded units aren't that good. Like, Alchemy has good bonded units in Skellige, but like Truffle requires bonded, and like these 2 are very good bonded cards. This could be a good bonded card. These are okay, but nobody's playing Truffle anywhere for Selena Harpy. Not even Lesser Witch. Like, this could be okay. And that's it, right? I guess you're playing Truffle for Hunt Reavers as well. But like most of these bonded units are pretty bad. No one's really playing them. So, like I don't know a lot of Golden Necker decks that play any of these cards because they're 4P. Like 4P cards don't really work well in a Golden Necker deck. They require that you end up with a bunch of 9s, and there's just not that many good 9s. Knife Juggler? Really? Come on, man. This requires going full monkey bonded. This is not a versatile card you put in a random Golden Necker deck. Just for Truffle? Mushy Truffle isn't as good as it used to be. It just isn't. Like, Golden Necker decks aren't like playing 3 cards and then passing and using the carryover from Truffle to win a game. Like, the days when like those 6 points made the difference or decided games are, in my opinion, long gone. Truffle's been nerfed a few times. Truffle came out at like 8p, didn't it? Like, sure, it could be buffed, fine, but like the other locations could also be buffed to 7. The other analogous ones. But I also don't think it's like the highest priority to buff a card like that. There are other things that are more pressing. Zoltan's Company. I mean, I just don't like this card. Yeah, this goes in the category of garbage design. The number of Zoltans in your deck. What a stupid ass way to make a card. How about the number of gold dwarves in your deck? Like, why even have that? Like, is it just for flavor? Like, are we just designing entire like archetypes because the word Zoltan is in them? Like, how does that make other dwarves feel? Like they don't exist. Like, Zoltan is the token dwarf that CDPR acknowledges. Could be buffed. I don't even know where to put this. So, I'm talking about sticky situation or shitty situation. When your opponent plays a unit with 4 or less power, flip cell. So they have to like guess that you're playing shitty situation and then play bigger cards to get it to flip. And if they don't, then you gotta click it yourself and it boosts a unit in your hand by 6 and then locks itself. Which is a thing they had to add to the... Like, they had to add code and tech that supported this card existing because artifacts couldn't be locked before. And then it was bugged. There was a number of bugs with it because it was like new thing. Like, it's like a solution looking for a problem. Like, who said the... I would really like to hear from the designers, like, what they were trying to accomplish with this card. Because I still don't fully understand it. Like, I still don't feel like I can't come up with a good explanation for this card. Like, setting aside the fact that most people don't know how it works, and so it might work for that reason. Like, might get you like a win on even or up a card because they don't realize what it's doing. The trigger condition being opponent playing a unit with 4 or less power is so weird. And then it goes between boosting adjacent units by 2 and like a hand buff. Like, what? Well, Shin said it was actually very strong but got nerfed before release. What that translates to me is Shin thought it was very strong, and so Shin said this would be OP, and so they nerfed it. Just a cheese card you can play to cheese a win round 1. But what if you don't draw it round 1? Like, what is this card that gets worse along, like, in each subsequent round? Who wants that? Especially when you don't have a tutor for traps. Don't tell me Reordain. That's not a tutor. That's a massive ass commitment. That's like calling Hensel the tutor. Hensel's not a tutor. It gives the explanation subtext, revenge is sweet. So they pour honey on someone's head? And then what? Stick him in a bear cave? Is it like somebody was just really obsessed with how clever the phrase sticky situation sounds? Like somebody like learning English for the first time really is enamored by the sticky situation? Oh, this is, as you call it in American, a sticky situation. Because you have honey on your head. And honey is sticky. You get it? You get it. But yeah, that's so funny. Right? Let's go have beer and Budweiser together. Speak of Westerns. Yes, yes. What the fuck is like? Like I just want to understand what like was it somebody's nephew that came up with this card and they just couldn't tell him it's stupid? And so they have to literally re-engineer the ability to lock artifacts into the game to make it possible? That was exactly the process, but they didn't go for a Budweiser? Jan was in the room. I can guarantee. Like, okay, what is this in like other languages? What can somebody like does the phrase sticky situation translate to like Russian or Polish? Like, what does it say in your clients? I don't know. I don't play in Polish. Does anybody have a different language client and tells me that if the phrase sticky situation, what the literal translation of your version is? In Spanish, it's like Quins, and it's like, what does that mean? What's the literal like translate? Who is made of honey? Is that what it literally translates into? Honey makers? Yeah, that makes no sense. That makes no sense. Like, sticky situation has nothing to do with honey. It's a metaphor, for fuck's sake. But they literally drew it. It's just, I don't know. In Polish, it's a slippery situation. Okay, slippery situation. That makes more sense. In Russian, it's the same wordplay. But the phrase sticky situation is an English idiom, right? During the Eocene period, the swamp may have scared away most of the critters. These shit, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's not what I was looking for. I need etymology. Is that the right word? Right? Or is etymology only applied to words, not phrases? Any linguists here? This Jebek situation. It is Kellebrick Angelenheit. Oh my god. German words, man. Why are you like this? Do you all just hate your mouths? Like, yeah, our mouths must get workout. It's important. Part of our daily regimen of 6,000 push-ups and eating sawdust. It makes for strong Germans. Okay. Particularly awkward, embarrassing, precarious, difficult situation or circumstance. Yeah, like, if his underwear was covered in, like, honey and there was a bear about to lick him, that would be a sticky situation. Both literally and metaphorically, you know? Like, he just had some sticky stuff on his head. This is not a sticky situation. This is just sticky. You could have just put a picture of a bottle of Elmer's glue and said, sticky situation. He's literally about to be tortured? Okay, but like, why is the dude trying to grab the honey with a stick? Is he trying to make cotton candy? Like, is he gonna go spin this into... It's ants? Where? Oh, there's ants on the stick. So they put honey on him and they're gonna make the ants crawl over him? I mean, as far as torture goes, that's not a bad way. I'd much rather have some ants crawling over me, like picking up honey, than have my toes chopped off or whatever. He's like, oh, I'll make these ants go. Look, do you think the ants are gonna drill through the honey and get at your skin? Like, they're gonna get stuck too. They're fire ants? I mean, fire ants are red though. Right? We gotta get to the bottom of this. Yeah, see? This is what fire ants look like. Those are not fire ants. Nuh-uh. No, siree. Those are black. Those are maybe, like, they could be army ants, but they're not fire ants. The army ants have these, like, giant pincer thingies. There's a hint of red if you look closely. Well, if you squint hard enough, you can copium anything into existence. Scaphism. The boat is another ancient Persian method of execution mentioned by Plutarch in the Life of Artaxerxes. Entailed the trapping a victim between two boats, feeding and covering them with milk and honey, and allowing them to fester and be devoured by insects and other vermin over time. Okay, that's horrible. But this does not like imply that they're gonna leave him somewhere covered in ants for like 16 days. This tier list has gone deeper than the Titanic. Well, I just really want to understand where to put Sticky Situation. And that required trying to understand where it comes from, and that required reading it. So we'll just call it cheesy nonsense, because it's basically a hand buff card at this point. Just play it round one, click it, and you get 6. They do in the books. Isaac does it. Okay, so in the books, that actually happens. They use fire ants to torture somebody. Lackeys like you, we coat in honey, then we tie him down on an anthill. Wait, what? Wrong card. Oh, deception. Thank you. Where is Sticky Situation? Where did I put it? Oh no, we've lost. We've lost the situation. I guess you could say we're in a sticky situation. No, no. Stop it. Where the fuck is this card? To design, you need to talk with devs via a chain of at least 3 untrained translators. Second row, right side. Ah, thank you. Okay, cheesy nonsense. Okay, deception was very strong, but where did I put deception? Oh, it's right there. I mean, I hate this trap because it ruined a Tory and whatever, but it's like with Angus, it's right. It goes in this shit tier right there, right next to Angus. Because you only play this with Angus now. It's either too strong without with Angus or too shitty, without Angus. Like it's one of those cards that it's like the same reason I hate Inspired Zeal, except worse, because this card kind of dictates like 80% of your deck. Deception? What's depressingly bad? Oh, I put it. Yeah, okay, it's cheesy. There you go. Thank you. Pitfall Trap. I like Pitfall Trap. And I don't know how to buff it. Because like the problem is the provision system does not translate. Like, first of all, the scale is whack. It's like a graph whose axis doesn't start at 0, starts at 4, and therefore confuses the crap out of every TV personality who misunderstands what the lines mean. Like having the damage of a card be tied to the provision of the card the opponent played is, first of all, kind of breaking the fourth wall. As far as I know, it's the only instance in the game, aside from like TWAT, where provisions are translated directly to points. That's not true. There's like AA and stuff, but it's not the same, right? Because AA and Torres, which are also equally garbage designs, are kind of there to compensate you for tutoring, so like for you to not feel worse that you're using a high provision tutor on a low provision card. I guess I kind of understand them, but this, like, your opponent played a card that has extra, like, I've just never liked that. Like, I just don't think the word provisions. I think if you have to stick the word provision inside of the game, like outside of the deck builder, if you interact with provisions in any way, to me that's a symptom of bad design. Like, if you can't just say gold, bronze, or, you know, silver, platinum in my version of the game, then you done wrong. Like, if you have to specify a number that's related to a provision system, which you don't interact with in any way once you're in the game, it's only for deck. Like, you've done something. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, Muta is also a terrible design. Like, if I used to destroy the next card played and it was completely busted. No, that part makes sense too. You could make it like damage the next card the opponent plays, the next unit opponent plays, by the base power of the last card played. Something like that. And Yaga? Yeah. Yeah, right. Name one card that references provision and isn't a stupid, like, a problematic design. AA is 100% problematic. Torres also. Fukusia, yes. Right? Sigdrifa, yes. Garantier, yes. What was the Pitfall Row effect? Like, what if it was like, when an opponent plays a unit, damage adjacent units by, like, its power or something? And if a unit entered the row, they took 2 damage? Yeah. But the fact that it's an artifact you can't remove would have made it very annoying, right? It's like a neat effect. It was a special? Oh. Oh, right. Like Blood Moon, you would just apply it to the row. Makes sense. I think that in its current form, it's kind of a card that rewards, like, you can be very clever with it if you know your opponent's, like, deck, or like you can predict their cards. But also the opponent has some counterplay options. So it's fine. And you can flip it for 6, which is also fine. I started playing around Merchants of Ophir. I mean, I played it in Witcher 3, but... Alright, here is Prism Pendant. Honestly, Prism Pendant is also cheesy nonsense. Not because... Yeah, it is. Because if it works, it will play for 1 billion points. If it doesn't, it won't. And it's... Like, it makes no sense that it's like the... Oh yeah, another card that goes off of the provision number. Right? Like... Oh, Lacerate doesn't proc it, but Hailstorm does because you target a card. Like, it's just silly. Just change it. Just delete. I don't know, but I don't really want to. It's dumb. Poison could be buffed. I think this could be 5 provisions. And then it would come out as a 6 body that poisons something. Okay. It's a trap, you know? Incinerating trap, I don't want it to be 4P. It's not good design either. It just is. And honestly, the only reason it sees play right now is because it counts as a trap. Nobody's putting this in their decks like, oh man, I wish I had an incinerating trap right now so I could play it and flip it for 3 damage. Oh, right. I'm doing bronzes again. Thank you. But it was like the last 2 traps, so I'm just going to assume these traps are golds because it's a little bit silly. I think Crushing Trap is pretty good. You know, it's like a Lacerate that you can play in advance and combo with something else. And since Lacerate benefits from more units being on a row, you could play this and then the next turn play something that moves the enemy units and then it works, right? And you can also play cards that encourage the opponent to row stack, and so there's like some synergies. Like, you know, I like the idea of like forcing the opponent into a corner and then crushing them, right? Like Catwitcher, Saber-Tooth Tiger, making a bomb, like lots of things can make the opponent stack and weather, like, and then once they do, then you can be like, bam, like I think that's cool. I just wish traps had better tutors or better way to like access them when you need them than just Onira. Nivelle Crushing? No, I wouldn't Nivelle Crushing. If I was trying to like get value out of Crushing Trap, out of Nivelle, sorry, I'd play like Sentries and Megascopes and shit, right? Have a bunch of Sentries and then move all the enemy units so that they all take like 3 or 4 damage. But that's a lot of work when you could just move your own units with Gatan. It's a better Nivellen. It's a Gatan that moves all your units and damages enemy units by 8. So. Alright. So this has been my review of the scoia'tael decks, cards, and ranking them on tier. I'll post this on Twitter. We'll put a video on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment. What do you disagree with in this list? What would you put in a different category? And also, like, what card do you hate and like the most? What is my most hated card in scoia'tael? Honestly, like, I love a lot of these scoia'tael cards. If I had to pick one that I really hate playing against, it would be Heist. It would be Heist. Because it completely, like, warps the game. Maybe Quarixis. I also don't enjoy playing against this. Oh, Dana, like, completely disabled certain decks. Like, there's some decks I just can't play because this exists. And they can't have... You can't fit an answer to Dana in them. Like vampires. Or you just have to run a Riptide for the 1 in 30 games you go against Harmony, because if you don't, you just feel like shit. Because this is a card that has to be answered right away. You can't lock it because they always run Purifies. It's so silly.